Hello.
Not on.
Oh, I'm good.
Good. Thank you very much. You all saw that. I did not do that. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Perry Nemiroff. I work for a company called Collider, and I am beyond thrilled to be here moderating this conversation for you right now. So let's not waste any time. It is my honor to reintroduce the team behind Where the Crawdads Sing. We have author Delia Owens, Director Olivia Newman, and also producer Elizabeth Gabler. I'm going to turn myself a little bit so I can see more. All right, Delia, so I'm coming your way first because we got to go back to the beginning just a little bit. I was reading a quote you gave that said your whole life led to this story, but you didn't actually sit down to write it until you retired from your work as a wildlife scientist. So why was then the right time? Why was the culmination of all the experience you had exactly the tools you need to tell this story?
First of all, am I on? First of all, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit emotional right now. I mean, thank you for making this. I'm just so thrilled at the film that these wonderful people, these wonderful group of women, the whole team, there were some men too, made. I'm so thrilled with the film. And I grew up in the woods of South Georgia. And my mother used to say to me, she would encourage me and my girlfriends to go as far into the oak forest as we could go. She wanted me to experience real nature. She wanted me to maybe see a fox or a deer with her fawn. She'd say to me, go way out yonder where the crawdads sing. And I don't think she realized how seriously I'd take her advice until she saw me with a one-way ticket and a backpack going to Africa. And I stayed for 23 years studying wildlife. And since then, I have lived most of my life near the wilderness. And what I learned is that how much we are part of nature. We're not separate from nature. We can learn a lot about ourselves. And it made me also realize how I felt to be isolated from other people. I miss my girlfriends back home, and I realized how important it is to have a group. So I became determined to write a novel about a young woman who was isolated and how that would change her behavior. The book is really about how we need other people. But I told it in reverse by showing a young woman and how loneliness, rejection, being isolated, how that affects your behavior. And it does change you. And I wanted to reach people with this story because I think it's important. And so I decided to add a love story and a mystery, and my whole idea was to try to make it readable so that I could connect with a lot of people. And I've been very fortunate to do that.
You have most certainly done that, and you're going to do it even more when this movie hits theaters on July 15th. All right, Elizabeth, I'll come your way now, because I know you've had some past collaborations with Delia, and you were one of the first people out there to see the potential in turning this book into a film. So when you see that potential in a piece of source material, what is step one to making that a reality?
Well, I was so excited when I saw that Delia had written a novel, because I was blessed to have worked on one of her nonfiction books called The Eye of the Elephant. And I read it immediately. It was the first few days of its publication, and Reese Witherspoon had named it as her book pick for Reese's Book Club. So I called Reese's partner, Lauren Newstadter, and I said, are you guys producing this movie? And she said, no, but we can. I said, well, will you do it with us? And she said, yeah. So for me, I started to read the book and I couldn't put it down. And as I started to become more and more invested emotionally in the story and Kaya's character, my heart was breaking for her on every page, and I just knew that it was so cinematic, and I felt like there was such potential to bring it to life in film, and for people to follow that mystery and to cry with her as she was left one by one, the people of her life left her, and then to have that amazing love story at the center of it. It was also romantic, but the beauty and the raw energy of the marshlands that she was living in just spoke to me so strongly. And so we optioned the book, thankfully, and we had a wonderful experience with our screenwriter, Lucy Alabar, who just said yes right away, and it was just one of those magical experiences that led us to Libby. We wanted to make the movie so badly, and the minute we had our conversations with Libby for the first time, it was very clear that she was the one to bring it all to life.
Olivia, I'm coming to you in a minute, but I do have one other question for you, Elizabeth, because this movie is a pretty big deal for your company, 3,000 Pictures. I believe it's the first movie that you're going to release. So what was it about this particular story that I guess felt like the best possible starting place for your company in that respect?
Well, I mean, first of all, I guess passion. All of us at 3,000 Pictures, it's, you know, we were at Fox, at 20th Century Fox, when we first optioned the material and started developing the project. And then we moved our company to Sony, and it became 3,000 Pictures. So our chairman, Tom Rothman, loved the book too, and I have to say that the entire company welcomed us with open arms, and they were so excited about this project. I mean, every single person that I got to know at Sony over the last couple of years has thrown their heart and soul into this movie and loves it so much. And I think that with the pandemic hitting and the book just becoming this publishing phenomenon, probably the biggest in, I would say, at least 2 decades, the potential for it as a theatrical feature was so evident to all of us. The scope of the film, the depth of the characters, and the classicism of this as a film harkens back to movies for us, like, for example, Out of Africa, or just big movies that we haven't seen in the theater for a long time. And fortunately now, audiences have been going to the theaters. They are in droves now going back to the theaters, and so perfectly positioned in the middle of summer as a wonderful entertainment for couples, you know, girlfriends, families, you know, to go and see this movie together in a theater and a theatrical experience was just something we really wanted to take advantage of. So let me tell you, I'm lighting candles for this one.
For what it's worth, my mom and sister are so excited to see this movie, and I can't wait to be in a theater sharing something like this with them again. So, Olivia, 2-parter for you on first joining the project here. So you scored the directing gig on this really highly anticipated adaptation. What is one thing about it that you were most excited to dig into and to tackle? But then also, what is something that you pinpointed as a unique challenge that you hadn't tried tackling before?
How long do you have? It's funny, my father has my 2 young kids right now upstate. They're spending a couple weeks with their grandparents, and he has a piece of land in the Catskills, and that's where I spent my childhood on weekends. We were a big family. I'm the youngest of 5, so that's where we went. We went and played in the woods, and he built a cabin there that has no electricity still to this day, unfortunately. But that's where we found magic, was running around the woods, and we were city kids. I grew up in New York, and it was really important to my dad, who spent a lot of time in the woods, that his kids get to know nature and get to just, leave electronics at home. We didn't have a TV growing up, just be out there and find the magic in really connecting to our roots, as Delia so beautifully puts in her novel. So being able to explore that unique relationship that Kaya has to the marsh, and being able to really get to know that landscape and create a world where you really understand that this character is really part of this landscape. And I think in the book, there's that line where Kaya says, "And the marsh became my mother," and it just, it's one of those lines that is such punch in the gut because you understand both how lonely she is, but how much she has through that connection. So that was, for me, something that I was really excited to explore. And then I'm always looking for stories that center on incredible heroines, female characters that are very complicated. And I had never read a character like Kaya, who is not just, strong and resilient, all these words you think of for heroines, but she's also timid and shy and awkward, and isolation makes her act differently. And so she walks this line between being wild and being civilized, and she's constantly trying to figure out how to connect with people and how to fit in, but also has this completely different upbringing. So for me, exploring that character I just could not wait, and finding the right actor to embody her was, of course, super important. And then in terms of challenges, I never shot on boats. I had never shot with drones. I had, never shot in a place where, you have to deal with the wildlife on a daily basis, from snakes to bugs to alligators, where the weather is completely unpredictable, and we have to deal with flooding and, crazy thunderstorms and lightning strikes and everything. So it was a challenging production, but it was also kind of lovely that all of those challenges really put us in the shoes of Kaya. So we all got to experience it firsthand making the movie.
Well, now I have to follow up. With all those things that you just listed there, was there any particular day of filming where one of those things, one of the elements caught you by surprise? And, in most situations, maybe people would have panicked. We're not going to make our day or something like that. But you were all able to, to work with it or maybe pivot and find a creative solution, and you were better off for it.
Trying to think of just one day. One of the things that happened during production, we shot in May and June in Louisiana, and we chose those months because May was supposed to be a drier month. So we had this great plan that we were going to shoot all of our exteriors in May and then save our interiors for the hot, wet month of June. And there was an unprecedented amount of rain at that May. People kept saying, we're breaking records. Yeah, we've noticed. We had to shut down production at one point because there had been so much rain. We had used up all of we started shooting all of our interiors, and then the sun came out, and it was this glorious 5 days of beautiful sun, and we had nowhere to shoot because all of our exteriors were flooded. Kaya's house was surrounded by a lake. You literally couldn't get to the house that we had built because it was flooded. But it was kind of a wonderful moment because it was right in the middle of the shoot. I think we were a month in, and so we got these 5 days to catch our breath, to take a step back, review everything we had shot, and figure out how we were going to manage to get through the rest of the shoot. So we had things like that happen all the time. I think shooting on boats, one of the things that we sort of hadn't realized is you can scout. We go out on these boats and we would scout for the perfect location that we wanted to shoot some of the marshlands, and we would pick our spots and we would figure out where the sun was going to be and how, perfect time of day to be there. And then we'd get out there the day of to shoot, and the water would be too low, and the boats would get stuck in the mud because the water rises and falls, and it's a bit unpredictable. So it was a good lesson for us that you just can't mess with Mother Nature, and you had to be ready to pivot. So we'd have to be ready to go out and look for, where is the deeper water and how can we make this work? And there's nothing on the screen that I wish wasn't there, so we would always manage to find something great.
Well worth it. Shooting on location really enhances this film big time. A question for all three of you now, because you also got to work on this film with Reese Witherspoon, and in general in this industry, one of my absolute favorite things to see is when you have someone super famous with a huge platform like Reese Witherspoon, and she uses that voice and platform to be able to help get films made that she really believes in. So given your experience working with her, what is something about her as a collaborator and a leader that really makes you excited for all the future filmmakers and storytellers that are going to get to work with her as she produces more and more?
Well, I think she's incredibly smart, and she's had so much experience that she knows how things go, and she has an eye to story, and she has an eye for casting, and she has just all of this wisdom from her years of working in the industry. And at our very first meeting, she said, one of the things that we really believe in doing at Hello Sunshine is, helping filmmakers, especially women filmmakers, make that big leap. This was my first studio movie, and I had done an independent feature before. So she said, how can we help support you? And that was sort of the feeling I had the whole way, was whatever support I needed to make that leap, and that, Hello Sunshine was gonna be behind me, and 3,000, of course. So I think that I think it's incredible to use her experience and her wisdom to then open doors for other women filmmakers.
Elizabeth, how about for you? What is it like collaborating with Reese as a producer?
Well, I've known Reese for a really, really long time. I was blessed to work on Walk the Line. So that was an incredible journey, and to see her win the Oscar for that performance as June Carter Cash was, it was one of the most phenomenal moments of my career. And our friendship, I guess we have a really symbiotic vision of what great material is, and her support of the book initially, and then the collaboration between Reese and Hello Sunshine and Lauren Lee Newstadter and their team and my team was just a family. I mean, it was amazing. And because she's such a brilliant actress herself, for me, I just was always the benchmark of, like, when we were looking at, we did see quite a few actresses for Kaya. We all loved Daisy so much, and she was, we were elated when she read it right away and wanted to do it. But I always would think of Reese as like the complete sounding board when it came to anything having to do with performance and reality and everything. And for me, it was always like the touchstone, like, are you okay with this? Are you okay with this? And just having her right there all the time was such a blessing for all of us.
Delia, for you, whether it's Reese or anybody on this core team here, what was it about them that gave you the confidence that they would handle your baby, your book, the way that you wanted it to be as they brought it to film? Because I know you were a little nervous about making that arrangement at the start of it all.
Yes, I was. It's a big thing to hand over. I wrote Crawdads, as I said. It took 10 years and spent a lot of time beyond that editing, and I wasn't even sure I wanted it to be made into a movie. I wasn't just going to give it to anybody. I really wasn't. And so when my agent, I have an agent who is seasoned. He's been doing this for years, and so he doesn't get excited about anything because he's been in the business so long. And he called me one morning and he says, "Well, something interesting has come through." And that's as excited as it gets, so I know what. And he said, well, Reese Witherspoon and Sony want to make Crawdads into a movie. Oh, well, that, is beyond interesting. That's and I knew Elizabeth Gaber from many years before. I knew the quality of her work. When you go into her office, which is beautiful, and anyway, every poster you see on the wall, you think, oh my God, she made that movie. She made that. I mean, one after the other, huge movies. And so I trusted Elizabeth. I also trusted Reese because she's done so many good films, and I knew that both of them cared about this. They flew me to LA, which was so fun, and we sat around this table, and the very first words out of their mouths were, "We want to stay with the story. We love the story. We're going to make a movie that is the same story as the book." And no author thinks their story can be improved upon. So, but seriously, that is a big thing for an author, to know that they're going to stay with the story, and they told me that they would, and that meant a lot to me, and I just had so much confidence. And then from then on, everybody they chose, from Libby to Daisy to let's not forget the guys. Tate is pretty cute. He was perfect. So I just, every step of the way, I trusted them and believed in them. They invited me to be on the set, and oh my gosh, that was so surreal. to sit there one night on the beach with Chase and Kaya sitting next to the campfire, and the real moon comes up because they timed it. They timed it everything so the real moon would come up. Then the fake moon comes up because the real moon didn't give enough light for their faces, so they had to have a fake moon. And then the waves start coming on the beach just to the right rhythm because they have a big wave machine out there. So there's all this movie magic going on, and then Chase and Kaya start talking and my words come out. You know, it's just surreal. It is just, you just can't believe it's happening.
So they want to stick with the story, and that was important to you. But is there anything about even your own work, even all this time that you put into writing this story, but then when Lucy adapted it, did anything become even stronger, I guess, in your eyes than you ever realized it was before?
That's a very good question. You know, I don't think so. I think that, well, let's put it this way. A lot of things, I think, visually, a movie is so visual, of course, that some scenes, like, well, I don't know, we're not worried about giving things away, we're not worried about spoilers. We're not worried. Oh, we are worried, okay, I'm not gonna give it away. Okay, so, any of the most scenes that included action come across more vividly in a movie than in a book. So some of I wouldn't say that the words in Lucy's beautiful screenplay were that different, than the book, but graphically on the screen, some scenes come across as wow. You know, you just sit there and go, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And that was the only thing that was different to me.
It's a good way to answer that question. Speaking of the adaptation process, so Elizabeth, I know you have a good amount of experience in that department. So when you're adapting a piece of source material to screen, is there anything that stays consistent from film to film? But then also, is there anything specifically unique to where the Crawdads sing in terms of how that process worked?
Well, the structure of where the Crawdads sing was very, very challenging. And so I think when Libby came on the project, it really crystallized for us, because there were many ways to tell the story cinematically, but the most important thing for us was that we kept Delia's voice. That was critical. And that is something that I think for 3,000 Pictures is really important to us, because so many of the projects, probably 80% of our projects in development are based on books, and a lot of them are best-selling books and beloved books. And the one thing you never want to do when you have such a great core fan base on a movie is to change the author's voice to a place where they get angry with you. Because, I'm such a big reader, and I promote reading everywhere I go. It's really important to me that people read. And so I want to be supportive of the author and the author's voice, and that's something that's really critical to us. But the key to a great adaptation is it's a hat trick. Because basically, if you go back and you look at a book, and you think, when you see the movie, you think you're seeing that book exactly as it's written, but if you go back and look at it again, you'll go, wait, that scene's not there, it's here, or those two are combined. And that's the skill of a great adaptation, is to make you think you're really reading the book again visually, but truly you can't do that because it's almost impossible to translate the written word verbatim into a film. So it's a skill, and it's tricky, and sometimes you can't do it. So for me, I always look for the thing. I have to be able to say, there are a lot of great books that I've read that other people have done, some successfully, some not successfully. But if I can't say going in, I know how to do this as a movie, I can see how to adapt it, then I won't try, because I just don't think I have the vision. And somebody else may have a better version of it than me.
You had it here, and one of what I think would be one of the most challenging things about adapting this book is how many, I guess, like genres and themes and also timelines are involved in telling this story. So, Olivia, I'm sure a lot of this comes your way via the script, but what can you do, especially with your cinematographer, Polly, in order to make sure that
we can jump around like that, but everything still flows smoothly and feels like a natural build.
Well, one of the things that is different from the book is just structural. So when I first came onto the project, what I pitched was that we try to be with Kaya as much as possible. In the book, we have this luxury of, a whole novel where we get to go with other characters and see bits of their lives, and we get to follow the sheriff, as he's piecing together, the case. But we only have so much time in the movie, and I thought, well, how can we be rooting for Kaya and be with Kaya as much as possible? And so we moved the arrest up early, so that when you're in the present storyline, you're following her trial, and you're wondering, is she guilty or not? Is she going to get off or not? And then when we flash back to the past, you're following her survival story, and that leads into these different romances, and eventually kind of gives you the building blocks to the case and sheds more light on whether or not she did it. And so that was one way to sort of weave this murder mystery, but still be in the point of view of our main character and still feel like you're watching Kaya's story rather than jumping into the points of view of other people. And then, we thought that it was actually wonderful to be able to contrast what Kaya's world is like in the marsh versus in jail and in the courtroom. How alone and sort of, in that jail cell, there's nothing. I mean, she has a window, all she can see is sky. When she's in the marsh, she's just surrounded by this beauty. And so we thought, being able to cut back and forth between those locations was a great way to sort of capture the isolation and why she feels so desperate to get back to the marsh, because she's just been cut off from, all sensory experience being in that jail cell. So for us, it was a nice challenge to say, how can we contrast these sets and these, but still keep us, you really feel like you're in the same story because you're always with the same character and you're always kind of rooting for and following the same character.
We have to talk a little bit about Daisy. So I can imagine what you saw in her in the audition room. I mean, she is absolutely incredible, and I would never be able to picture anyone else in that role at this point. But what is something that, even after going through the audition process with her, what is something she did on set that surprised you? And I guess took her performance to the next level in a way that you could never have anticipated?
I mean, well, first of all, Daisy is one of the funniest people you'll ever meet. That just surprised me as a human. She's so funny. Wes Anderson, please cast her in something. You can put that on the record, please. She's just brilliantly funny. But the thing about Daisy is the smallest gestures carry so much weight. And so I remember early on when we were prepping, we were talking about the love story with Tate, and she wanted to make sure that we felt the build of Kaya falling in love. And we, there wasn't a scene where Kaya is sort of longing for him. It all kind of happens very organically. And so we came up with this idea, what if we just get a moment where Kaya's alone in her house and she finds a shirt that he accidentally left there, and she smells it. That when you're falling in love and the smell of the person is so. And so we just set up the shot, and I had our stand-in doing it, and we were watching, it's just this very simple move, and she walks in, and we're pushing it on her, and did it with the stand-in, and I just looked at Paul, I said, I don't think this is gonna work. This is weird. Smelling a shirt, this is just weird. And then Daisy comes in ready in makeup and costume, and she does it, and it's like we all caught our breath, because just the way that she picks up that shirt and smells it, you feel all of those feelings of being in love. And she could just do that with anything, any little moment, any glance at somebody. It's just full of so much depth that you immediately, you don't need any explanation, you get it. So she did that. She surprised us all the time.
All right, I want to turn that back around to you now in terms of your approach as an actor's director, because there are so many scenes in this movie where it's heavy emotional beats where
it's just her, and some she has no dialogue to express how she's feeling. She needs to just convey it without any of that at all. So in really challenging moments like that, what do you strive to do for an actor as an actor's director in order to make sure they have clarity in the moment, but also that they feel supported and can go to places like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I will say there were some days where we would come on set and we'd have 5 scenes to shoot and not a single word of dialogue. And Daisy would say, "Oh my God, I have no lines today. This is so exciting." I mean, she would really get excited for it. And you know, I trained in theater before I turned to directing, and so I always approach any scene from the point of view of the actor and what they need to really get themselves into the right emotional place. And you know, that's reminding them of the circumstances. And you know, there's so much story and jumping around, so it was really important for Daisy and I to always sort of recall, okay, where are we in Kaya's trajectory, and what has she just experienced, and what is she going into, what expectation is she going into the scene with, and really just kind of getting us all into that space and into the, you know, into the emotional space that the character is in. And I will say that our young actress JoJo, who's phenomenal, plays young Kaya. What's amazing is that she works the exact same way as an adult actor. So, you know, early on I asked her father, what does JoJo need to get into the, you know, into when she has to prepare for these more emotional scenes? And he said, we get, you know, we just get real quiet and we talk through what, you know, the character is going through, and she does the exact same prep that I do with adult actors. We remind ourselves what just happened. We talk through it. We talk through what the emotions are that Kaya's going through, what she wants. It's exactly the same. So I think both of them were just incredible. Such a pair right there. I feel like I'm coming close to time. All right, I'll wrap it up.
Delia, I did want to end with a question for you, and usually I do hesitate to ask someone to explain away the purpose of their story they're telling, but in this case I am especially curious. What were some of your top goals for the book when you wrote it in terms of the impact you wanted it to have on readers, and how does this movie build upon what you started?
I think the most important, and the first answer I would give to that is that resilience, that we can solve our problems on our own if we have to. Kaya shows us over and over again that when you get knocked down, you just stand up and keep going again. You just keep going, you keep going. And that was one of the main points of the book. But then also, as I mentioned earlier, to emphasize the value of family and friends by showing what happens when they're not there. And then the other really important theme to me was the importance of nature in our lives and how much we can learn from nature. Because we're not separate from nature, we are part of nature, and we can learn a lot about ourselves. We can learn a lot about human nature from nature itself. And Kaya learned how to feed herself, she learned how to protect herself, she learned how to survive from nature. And we talk about Mother Nature all the time, but we don't really treat nature like she's our mother. And Kaya shows us that it's important to do that because nature is where we come from, and nature's a big part of our lives. And I was hoping, I didn't want to go into that too much with dialogue or anything like that, but just the story itself shows the importance of our being in nature.
I love it. It's a beautiful answer. Thank you so much. And thank you to all 3 of you for spending some time with us and for sharing all this footage. Big thanks to everybody out there for coming as well. Spread the word. Where the Crawdads Sings hits theaters on April 11th.